Hey, it's Fit Gear Hunter, and up for initial thought today is the Garmin Enduro, fresh off the market, fresh out of the box. So I just got it today, so we're going to talk about my first thoughts on it. We're going to do a comparison to the Garmin Fenix 6 Titanium, so not the 6X, the 6 Titanium. But as always, everything on this channel, everything on the website associated with it, Fit Gear Hunter, as well as fitgearhunter.com, is focused on testing and tracking devices for the purpose of CrossFit training and high-intensity interval training. So we're not going to look at some of the similarities or features from the Ultra Run perspective, or the Descent now added to the Climb Pro, or the Trail Run VO2 Max is now added, which is really not a benefit just to the Enduro because they're on both watches. We're going to talk about what is in the Enduro, what do the specs look like, how does it feel on my wrist, how does it compare in looks and size to the 6, and we're just going to talk about the general things there. We want to be able to track and test this over the next few weeks to be able to see how does it feel. Does it feel too big? Do I notice an issue with missing the maps or the music? Because those are the things that are missing. So between the 6 and the Enduro, this is missing maps, so you can't go sort of navigate your way around without downloading a specific course, and it's missing music, so Wi-Fi connection. But what is the benefit between the two? As you'll see in a million reviews, I'm just going to summarize it in very simple points because I don't think it's worth talking about all the specs. This is over twice as long battery life. So if you imagine this was a 6X Solar. The 6X Solar had 24 days of smartwatch usage and 26 days if you were catching a reasonable amount of sun during the day. This has got 50 days of smartwatch usage and 65 days if you're catching a relatively decent amount of sun during the day. So it is more than twice the battery life, and then considerably more, like 3 times, because this is rated at 14. If you have the Solar 6, then it's 16 days. So 50 and 65. So it's huge on battery life. It's very lightweight. We're going to look at the new band. We're going to look at the overall casing of the Enduro and the accent colors and some of the first things, and pushing the buttons and checking the backlight. We're going to compare the brightness of this versus the Fenix 6. We're going to look at the size differences between this, the thickness, so you can feel like, have an idea of how big it's going to feel on your wrist. We're going to look at the weight differences between both of these with the bands on and with the bands off. We're going to look at the screen clarity. We're going to look at it on the wrist, like we said, and that's basically it. We're just going to dive the sort of first glance. A full review will come later. So if you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more, so there'll be a full review on this. I'm actually doing an in-depth review of the OH1 optical heart rate band, as well as a comparison coming for the Verity Sense from Polar, the optical heart rate replacement for the OH1. So with that, let's dive in. Most of this is going to be hands-on, then we'll come back together. Okay, so this is it. This is the watch. We're going to look at it compared to the Fenix 6 in a second, but this is the new monster watch from Garmin. It's got the all-black, or what they call carbon gray, titanium bezel with DLC, diamond-like coating around it, which means it'll be more protected than you would get on the regular titanium that came out on some of the Fenix 6 line. And it will hold up better. You know, the whole back, you have the same Elevate 2.0 heart rate sensor, the same plug-in clip. It does have sort of a ridged edge to the primary button, which is actually kind of a neat touch. Don't know that it's actually on the Garmin. Let me look. No, not on the Garmin. So that is a little bit of a different button to it, but all the other buttons are the same. Just looking at just the feel and look, I really love it. I love that they put this sort of neon accent color on the inside, as well as a slight colorization there on the button. So I think it's a really sharp looking watch, and we'll see how it goes long term with if it feels like it's too big. When you come to button presses, it is interesting that the button presses, the middle button, it doesn't have the same clickiness to it, but that could be just this production. I don't know. All the other buttons feel like they have a solid click to them, which is sort of something that's standard for the Garmin Fenix line. But this middle button, it just feels a little bit soft, so we'll talk about that in the final review. One thing I'm noticing, and I might have mentioned already in the clip that you'll see maybe later, but it does feel like there's interesting lag at times. And I noticed it in like the menu settings, which maybe they're doing a slower processor to conserve life. So if we go here and I want to go, sometimes I can get actually ahead of the processor. So when I was just setting up this to have always on backlight, I was able to get ahead of the processor before it could catch up. And I was like 2 button presses ahead just because I knew where I was going. So we'll see how that sort of holds up over time. Obviously all your activity profiles are loaded in here. Look at that. See, I pushed it 3 times and then it caught up. So that's going to be interesting. I'm not sure if that is just with this unit or if that's something that people might notice more long term. You can build your CrossFit profile if you have any interest in seeing what that's all about. You can watch one of the other videos. I tend to like it with this heart rate gauge, time of day, average heart rate timer on page 1. Page 2, anaerobic and aerobic training effect gauge, lap time, so you can track your rounds, your time per round, and keep track there, as well as your load building over the course of the workout, or if you just want to do a simple heart rate gauge or time of day. But that is the CrossFit workout that you can build, as well as all the other workout things that are built into this, like we'll talk about in a second, just some of the generic things that have come out across the whole Enduro and Fenix 6 line. But there it is in all its glory. Let's look at some of the actual hardcore details relative to the Fenix 6 line and come back together. Okay, we're looking at these side by side. We're just going to use the same screen. They're both turned up to full brightness so that we can start to look at some of the specs. Let's look just really quickly at some of the weight differences before we dive into the details. Okay, so what do they weigh with the bands on? So again, this is the titanium Fenix 6, coming in at 71 grams, and the Enduro coming in at 60 grams. So about 10 to 11 grams lighter. That's actually 18% lighter with the bands. Obviously the bands are making that much of a difference. Let's look at what it looks like with just the headset itself. Okay, so just looking at the weight, just to get a basic gauge of the difference in the weight of the casing, 47 grams of the titanium Fenix 6 versus 55 is actually coming at 54 a second ago. 54 grams for the 6 or the Enduro. So a little bit difference there. If you run the math on that, it's actually 15% heavier. So 15% heavier than the 6 titanium, straight standard, with all the guts included. Okay, so now we're going to look at thickness difference. So if I look at the actual thickness of the Fenix 6, 15.5, 15.6, typically what it comes in at. And the thickness of the Enduro, 16.5, so 1 millimeter thicker. Okay, so you can obviously see, the Fenix 6 here on the right is the titanium version. It's going to be 47 millimeters versus 51 millimeters on the Enduro. You can see the basic screen differences. I would say that they're pretty close. They're pretty similar. Obviously, I changed it to the same backdrop so that you actually had the same watch face. And when we go through the interface itself, one thing that I am noticing about the Enduro, which I don't know if this is standard for other Enduros that are out there, but it's got a little bit of a lag time in actually transitioning through the menus, but you can just sort of see if there's any colorization differences. I feel like there's a little bit of a difference, and I think it's probably because of one reason. I actually took both of these and just ran it under a light meter at full brightness on the flashlight mode. And it's interesting because the 6 titanium is coming in at 85 lumens and the Enduro at max brightness is coming in at 64.5 lumens. That's about 24% less bright. So I think the screen looks better on the 6 because it's just brighter. And you can think about like that as far as like power settings go. So at 100% brightness on the Enduro, that's actually only 76 brightness on the Fenix 6, or at least this variant of the Fenix 6, because I've done reviews about how the different versions of the 6 have had different colorizations to the backdrop. 80% on the Enduro is actually only 60% on the 6, 60% on the Enduro is 45%, 40 is actually 30, 20 is actually 15. So there's definitely the battery life differences. We'll talk about that in a second, but part of that might be because it's not pumping out as much brightness. It's definitely a far cry from a lot of the watches that are on the market today with transflective. So the brightest version of the brightest screen for the Vantage V2 from Polar is like 27 lumens. Same thing for the Coros Vertix, and the Suunto 9 can get to like 37 lumens. So it's still twice as bright as some of those, and the screen quality and clarity on this Enduro is as good, or at least hard to tell a difference between the 6 and this. So part of that I might just bring out in the full review just to see if there's any noticeable lag time or noticeable felt differences in the size. We can see in the back, obviously they both have the Elevate 2.0 heart rate sensor. This is more of a titanium build, so it should be titanium with DLC coated on the back, and this is titanium DLC coated on the back as well, diamond light coating. So very similar there. You can see it's a little bit flatter. It's got a little bit more curvature to the Fenix 6, and that's just how the 6Xs as well as the Enduro now look. Okay, so this is how the 6 looks on my wrist. I have a relatively smaller wrist, so it does look like or feel like it's protruding just a little bit, but that's just the standard thing, and you just got to get used to it over time. Okay, so this is how the Enduro looks. It actually feels just as flush, I think, because it has a flatter back. It feels like it's pressed against my skin a little bit more. It's definitely a big watch. Definitely it's got size to it, and we'll look at some of the differences in a more complete video. But for now, we're just going to look at it, just, you know, how it feels. We'll talk about it in full review later on. So let's talk about the band. We're going to take this off so we can get a better look. This is something that's really interesting to me because a lot of reviewers have not mentioned or even shown the band. I'm like, can somebody show the band? It just was released. First time Garmin's ever done a Velcro band. So you have two different wings to it, and they both, you know, Velcro on the side. I'm going to say at first, I don't know, you know, what Velcro strength they're using, but it actually feels, DesFit did a good review where he said it didn't seem to flick off, but this doesn't seem to have a significant grip. It does have a good thickness, a soft feel. It's sort of a squishy soft. When it comes to the stretchiness, it has a relatively decent stretchy, and I can compare that to, this is Polar's Vertix version, and Polar's Vertix version, which has this sort of clip system, is definitely more stretchy, not quite as soft, sort of a thick soft to it. So it's not quite as stretchy as the Vertix band, if you're at all familiar with that. But this is really the interesting design because you have to, for me, I have to like pull up one side, loosen it a little bit, pull up the other side, loosen it a little bit, and then slide it in, and then you got to clasp this, you know, down one at a time, and then you got to wiggle it on. But, you know, on the flip side, well, what does that matter? Because you're not going to take your watch off. You can sort of slide it through these rings, so it slides right out, and you can use a 26 millimeter quick fit band, any of the bands that are out there, and it slides right through. But I'm going to be curious. I don't know why they didn't put a little bit more of the Velcro on to give a little bit more secure feeling. Now, obviously, when you have Velcro on both sides, the overall taut feeling once it's wrapped around your wrist is going to probably keep it in place. I doubt you're going to have issues, but we'll talk about that in the full review. But all in all, I think it looks good, and it overall feels like it's high quality. I definitely like the sort of thick, soft feel to it. Wish it was a little bit more stretchy, and wish there had more Velcro lengths to it, and it felt like it had a little bit more solid feel, but we'll see how that goes more long term. Okay, so this is sort of odd, but I'm going to show you something that I just felt like was actually helped the whole situation. So I lift both wings up, and then if you put it down like on your pants, you can just hold that down and just sort of gauge which side you want to tighten the most. And that is actually the easiest way I've found to put it on so far in testing. Just wanted to share that random tidbit. So what do I think overall about the new Enduro? I love how lightweight it is, and I love how it looks. I love the accent colors. I think the neon sort of green accent color is super sharp. I like that it's all black. I like that the band is neon. I like that you can still use a 26 millimeter quick fit, but that the casing, the actual watch itself, which determines if it feels heavy on your wrist. So the heavier watches, the original Fenix 6, felt like it was hitting that bone a little bit too often because it was top heavy. This feels like it could be good. We're going to test it long term, but I like that you can switch out the bands. You can go with a thicker band, you can go with a leather band, you can go with any 26 millimeter quick fit. I do think it is awesome that the battery life is that long, but we're going to have to see if I'm going to miss the maps, if I'm going to miss music, because I did use that periodically, and see if there is a lag time screen to screen when flipping through it, or if the backlight being a little bit dimmer than the original Fenix 6 line is bothersome or noticeable at all. But overall, I like it a lot in what I'm seeing. We're going to put it to the test for CrossFit tracking, CrossFit training, high intensity interval training. Then we'll come back with a full review. So there it is, the Garmin Enduro. Thanks for watching.